Good evening, folks. And you know, if it's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday, it's time for Off the Record with Allie. And I'm just so excited to be here with you and be back in front of you having a conversation with a great friend. This time, we're going to talk about the voice of collaboration. So, welcome back to Off the Record, the Real Talk podcast. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus just to be able to take some time off and enjoy the holidays, allow you to enjoy the holidays. Hope you went out and you also listened to some of the more recent episodes of our great series on the voice of leadership. I'm so excited that, through the first 4 episodes, we actually had some incredible leaders drop some golden nuggets, and none other than your being a part of those conversations was the purpose of sharing all that great information. So I hope you're still going back and listening. I hope you're getting great nuggets out of it. And I'm so excited to move over into our next piece. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you've been with us throughout the Voices of Leadership, welcome back. And thanks for staying tuned on this journey. This series is about more than just titles. It really is about the lived experience of leadership, what it really takes to earn trust, lead people, and empower them to help build people-first cultures and create impact that lasts. Today's episode is titled The Voice of Collaboration. I'm so excited to have this young lady who's joining us share about the spirit of collaboration and the work that she does. Collaboration is a word that we hear all the time, and it shows up in mission statements and strategy decks and performance reviews. But what I'm really excited about is that real life collaboration isn't always easy, and we're going to talk about it. But when you do it, it's so worth it. It requires trust, it requires humility, and sometimes it requires leaders to take control and let go of control. And I think the most important piece in that is helping leaders learn how to let go of control. My guest today is Judith Smelser, President and General Manager of Central Florida Public Media. Please join me in welcoming her to the show.
Hi, Allie.
Hi, how are you?
It's great to be with you. I'm really good. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you. And it's so powerful to have you in the studio. Folks, if you're not aware, public media means this is our voice in Central Florida that shares information all across the community. I've had a long-term relationship with the organization, served on the board, and just really excited about where Judith has taken, her and her team have taken Central Florida Public Media. So Judith, I'm going to be quiet here for a moment and ask you if you would share just a little bit more about yourself and about Central Florida.
Well, thanks so much again for having me, Allie. Central Florida Public Media is really a beloved institution in our region. It's been beloved by me. I started my relationship with Central Florida Public Media over 20 years ago, and thank you for calling me a young woman, but I don't feel so young these days when I say that. I started as a reporter in the newsroom here and worked my way up to news director, and then was recruited to go elsewhere, went away and did other things, did some consulting for a while, and then returned about 4 years ago in this role as president and GM. And it's a role that I am incredibly honored and privileged to serve in and to serve this community in this way, because Central Florida Public Media is the region's only local nonprofit news organization that serves the entire 9-county region. And we are here to connect and empower our region with trustworthy independent journalism and with thoughtful conversation that's rooted in fact. We're really here to bring people together and to empower them to be informed, engaged citizens, residents, members of this community. And that's really what I'm trying to get everyone in the community aligned towards and around.
Well, and you do it so well because I've been a part of, like I said, on the board under
MFE, yep.
Let me get it right. WMFE, if I was a radio host, I'd be getting sanctioned by the producers. But WMFE, which was powerful because we've seen it over the generations and be that source of true journalism, right? And I think what we're talking about here today and what we have talked about previously, in a time when trust feels fragile, What does it really take leaders like yourself to bring people together in a way that's lasting?
You talk about trust, Allie, and it's something that we think about and we talk about and we wrestle with so much in our industry, in the news and media and journalism industry. Because if you look at the data, what you've seen is a precipitous decline in Americans' trust in media and in journalism. Right now, depending on which poll you look at, but every year since the 70s, Gallup has been doing a poll in Americans' trust in mass media to report the news accurately and fairly and thoroughly. And that number as of 2025 now stands at 28%. That is really, really disturbing when you think about it, because what that means is that people don't know what's true. And people don't know where to go to find what's true. There are countless sources of information out there, or things at least masquerading as information. But what we're seeing is that people really don't know who to trust, where to turn. And we desperately want to be, and we strive every day to be that trusted source of news and information about the community, the nation, and the world. But one of the things that we have learned in the industry is that no longer can we expect that trust to automatically attach to us. We need to be in partnership with our community, with our audience, with our potential audience, to talk with them about why they should trust what we do. We talk a lot about, and one of our strategic goals this year is around transparency, and is around really putting some time and effort and resource into explaining how we do the work that we do. And when we say that we're a trusted source of information, why should someone trust us? What does it mean when we say we have an editorial process? What does it mean when we say we vet all of our stories for accuracy and balance and fairness? And let's pull back the curtain a little bit. And that's one of the ways that we build trust. Another way that we build trust is being out in the community, physically, face-to-face, engaging and interacting with people in the community. And that's something that we've been doing a lot more of over the past few years.
Well, and I think you've done it well. And when I'm listening to you, I'm reminded that collaboration isn't just about consensus. It's about a commitment. And I love what you shared, that it's about a commitment of transparency, and it's a partnership, right? That you partner with the community because you're engaged with the community. It's a commitment to that community. It's a commitment to your purpose, and a commitment to doing the work together. I love that. Real conversations happen like this. And that's what I've loved about your work, the entire body of work that you've shared over the years, is that it is about having the real conversation with the real leaders in the community for the real talk. I came up with this great title, Off the Record, the Real Talk podcast, but you've been doing it. What would you share with our listeners on the secrets to being able to build that type of trust where the leaders open up and have a conversation?
It's really interesting, Allie, because yes, we have that real talk and that real conversation with leaders in our community. And we have made a real effort over the past few years to not only talk to the leaders and not only talk to the people that you might expect to hear on the news, but also to talk with real people, ordinary folks who are affected and impacted by the decisions those leaders make. So we want to hear from the leaders, and we want to ask for accountability from our leaders. That's the job of a news organization, is to hold the powerful to account. But the job of a public media organization is to reflect the voices of our community. And that means going beyond just the usual suspects, going to this week, for example, on our local public affairs show, Engage, which is also available as a podcast. We had on a number of folks who were affected by the recent increases in premiums because of what's happened with the end of the subsidies in the Affordable Care Act. And so that's
in every household, right?
I mean, we heard from folks who were dealing with this. And we talked to them about, what are you going to have to cut back on because of this? What does this really mean, in your real life? But in order to be able to do that, we have to have the trust of those folks. It takes something for somebody to be willing to put their trust in a news organization to tell their story accurately, to let them speak for themselves and be the subject matter expert, be the one with the lived experience, give voice to that lived experience. That's part of what we're trying to do. And another really interesting thing that we've done over the past year and a half or so is a project that brings regular people together from across the ideological spectrum. This is a project called One Small Step. And it's a project where we bring pairs of people together who have different worldviews. Maybe they have different political views. Maybe they have different religious affiliations. And they participate in a facilitated conversation where they talk to each other across that divide and find common ground, not to debate, but to really talk about their values and their influences and to build trust with one another. And honestly, we have had some of the most real conversations in those rooms that we've been privileged to share with our audiences. And by doing so, to show the community what it looks like to talk with people who disagree with you and to realize they're human beings too. And I think right now, that's really necessary. And that's a big role that we need to play.
And I think you just hit on a major point, right? Sometimes it's not always about getting along. Sometimes it's about having discourse. And that, when we think about it, disagreement is inevitable, especially in collaborative spaces. I love the story that you shared at the Vox Populi about how these different organizations who may have been seen as competitors in the landscape are actually looking at how can we work together. Would you mind sharing a little bit of that conversation we had?
Oh, I would love to. So the news industry has seen seismic shifts over the past 20 years. You've really seen the decline, precipitous decline, particularly of the newspaper industry. As the digital revolution happened, the bottom fell out of the ad-supported newspaper and news industry in general. Since in the past 20 years, we've seen 3,500 news outlets disappear. 3,500 news outlets in this country. More than 200 counties in America are now news deserts. That means they have no local news outlet at all. And so we looked at that and we really thought, what can we do as Central Florida Public Media, as a public service, publicly supported, community supported news organization? What can we do to make sure that Central Florida never becomes a news desert? All of us have seen declining resources. All of us are stretched thin. And what we realized is we can't do it alone. None of us can do it alone. We are in a situation where, and I think are never going back to a time where there is a primary news outlet, usually the local newspaper, that is your one-stop shop. That's all you need. None of us can do the job alone. But we all want to inform and engage and empower our community. And so I got together with my friend Megan Stokes from Oviedo Community News, which is a hyper-local digital news startup outlet covering that little community in Seminole County. And she's very like-minded. And we got together and we thought, what if we just got everybody in a room? What if we sent out invitations to all the local news outlets across Central Florida to come to a summit and see who might show up and talk about how we could work together to strengthen our news ecosystem for the next 10, 20 years. And we engaged the Central Florida Foundation. Mark Brewer from the Central Florida Foundation agreed to facilitate this summit.
Awesome facilitator. He's so engaging.
Incredible. And one of the things lots of people don't know about him is he is a former journalist. And he started his career as a reporter. And so he had an affinity for the subject. And he also told us, you don't need one summit, you need 3. This is a big subject. So we sent out these invitations, and you never know when you send out invitations to something like this. when you ask competitors to come together in a room and talk to each other honestly about how they do their business, would anybody show up? And people showed up. We invited people to our studios here at Central Florida Public Media, and we had about over a dozen news outlets showed up. Everybody from the Orlando Sentinel to Orlando Business Journal to WKMG to hyperlocals like Oviedo Community News and Vox Populi, Winter Park Voice, all of these different organizations showed up, for-profit, nonprofit, broadcast, print, digital. And even before we started the formal program, there was this buzz in the room, Allie, because people had been clearly hungry to talk about these issues. It can be really lonely being in an industry that's under stress because your teams are getting smaller and your colleagues are falling away in some cases. Not in my shop. We're very fortunate to have grown our news outlet over the past few years. But in many places, it's easy to feel alone. And these folks wanted to work together and they wanted to figure it out together. And we had wide-ranging conversations about everything from editorial collaboration to back-end collaboration to trust building with the community. It was truly inspiring. And that led to a task force being formed. That led to a decision to focus our editorial collaboration around looking at the local and regional impact of the unauthorized camping law that went into effect around this time last year. Through that effort, we shared and cross-published well over 100 stories. And that means that one news outlet gave their story to another news outlet, which might even be a competitor, and said, you can go ahead and share this story with your audience. And that means our community wins, because the audience over in one place gets to read the work of a reporter somewhere else. And also it means that instead of 10 nearly identical stories about nearly identical angles of this really complex issue, you got 10 different stories that were cross-shared and cross-published. The community wins when organizations work together. And this year coming up, we have some really exciting things that we're actually going to be sharing very soon about our new plans to cover the 2026 midterm elections together and do some joint voter guides and things like that. So it's really building momentum. It's been really inspiring to see.
Well, and I love to hear that, because, here, truly you brought competitors to the table, right? And you said, how can we best do this? And what I think of that is you built alignment. You said, and I love the ideas of cross-pollinating, because one of the things you do is you try to look to find validation of the story you read over here somewhere else, to say, okay, is in this world of AI, we have to worry about fake news. And that was a term years ago. Now it's reality. That, when you can find the true spirit of journalism, where you're sharing and it's about the people, the purpose, and the partnership, I think that goes really back to what we were saying. It's true leadership. So I applaud every single one of you. Now, Vox Populi gets my nod along with Central Florida Public Media. And, I have to say something to the hometown paper. I'm a product of Oviedo. So really excited about what they're doing, but you're bringing this spirit of collaboration to the community. Now, if a leader's listening here, how can I sit down when there's a competitive environment and understand how to do good from what we're doing?
Yeah.
What would you share with them?
So I think the starting place is get people in the room. People like yourself have been very kind in congratulating me and the partners on building this collaborative. And I've thought about what is it? What made it work? And the first step is get people talking to each other. Just provide the opportunity for people to be in the room. Number two, model vulnerability. And what I mean by that is, when I kicked off the first summit, I said something along the lines of, I'm sure that there are things that we're all nervous about going into today. And and I'll name mine. and I modeled that, and I said, one thing I'm nervous about is potentially creating something new, i.e. a collaborative, that people may want to support financially, and that could risk taking support away from my organization, which depends almost entirely on philanthropic support. I'm nervous about that, but I believe that we're going to build something that is so exciting that people who never thought about supporting journalism are suddenly going to want to support it, and that's going to help all of us. But I heard from people afterwards who said the fact that you, Judith, stood up and named that fear that you had, I think it gave us all permission to be vulnerable and to share and to be honest and open and to say the things that needed to be said in that room. So I think those are the two things. I mean, then the collaborative sort of took on a life of its own, which is really exciting. But get people in the room, give them the opportunity, and create the right environment. And that means modeling vulnerability, modeling candor, and speaking your truth. That gives people the opportunity and the permission and the courage to speak their own truth.
Yeah, and I love how you said that, because, a lot of times it's in leadership, we're teaching people the spirit of collaboration is, we'll say we're coming together. I can remember my days at Disney, the greatest collaborative efforts I've ever witnessed was Blue Sky, when they were coming together to create new vision. And it was about getting people in the room. And one of the things that I got to expand their vision, now you have to imagine telling Imagineers to expand their vision, was to say, get your partners in the room. A lot of times they were building these incredible attractions that bring people together all across the world, right? But they were doing it, the creative team was doing it absent of the project management.
Yes. And
then the two of them may get together at some point and say, oh, great, we're going to go build this great thing. It's going to take 18 months, 2 years. And then this guy shows up, or this young lady shows up from finance and goes, yeah, that's wonderful. It looks good. You only got $100 million. Out here is about 250. So, let me know when you guys get it fixed, and then bring me back in the room. But what if we did what you're modeling? And I love the term modeling vulnerability. What if the creators opened their set up to say, let's bring finance and project management into Blue Sky? And, I watched them actually do that, and it just improved the quality of the product, because then creatives knew what they were managing to the budget, and the project management team wasn't feeling like it was stuck in the middle, pulling between the two to try to create this incredible piece, but at the same time stay within budget. So, I think one of the things we can learn from our conversation here for leaders, here's the nugget to take away, is be vulnerable enough to make sure you bring all your partners in if you can. Then what you may come up with is something truly incredible. There's a great author out there, Franz Johansson, wrote The Medici Effect. And he talked about bringing disparate things together to create new and incredible things. And I think that's a possibility, even in the world of public media, and reaching out and making sure that community is engaged. You're doing such a phenomenal job of that. Not one of the things is Allie doesn't give accolades if you didn't achieve them. So I want listeners to know that it's not just a love fest here. It is truly embracing, especially in this difficult climate. You're in the world of media in one of the most challenging times in our history. How is that impacting the product that you're putting out, whether it be podcast or in your radio programs? How are you approaching that? What are some of the things you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, so before I answer that, I just want to say an amen to what you were talking about with Disney, because what that makes me think of is de-siloing, right? It's de-siloization. And when we did our journalism ecosystem summit, we intentionally invited, when we sent invitations out, we said, you can bring up to 3 people from your organization. You can bring an executive, you can bring an editorial leader, and you can bring a revenue person. Because all parts of that have to be working together, just like you're talking about, in order for the thing to be successful. You have to have leadership on board. You have to have editorial, because that's the equivalent of the Imagineers in your example.
Yes.
They're the ones that make the thing, and then you have to have the people who get the money. and if all of those three legs of the stool aren't working together, then you're not going to move forward. And we try to do that internally at Central Florida Public Media. I'm trying to constantly encourage collaboration internally, as well as doing that externally through the collaborative. So to answer your actual question, Allie, about how we're moving forward in a media environment that is changing by the second, it feels like sometimes. I get whiplash, and I will say, and I'll model vulnerability here for a moment and say, there are many times when I feel like I'm behind. And I feel that way because the industry is moving so fast, and because Central Florida Public Media is a small organization, and I, in my role, wear a lot of hats. We all on my team wear a lot of hats. And so I don't have a lot of luxury of time to sit around and read the articles and the research and all of those things about where things are going. But I do have a team of folks who are really plugged into that. And so because of that, we have made some changes. We have shifted some resources. We have shifted some focus, and we've changed our name to reflect that. So you mentioned earlier WMFE. So that is our broadcast side. WMFE 90.7 here in the Orlando Metro, and 89.5 WMFV up in Ocala and the Villages are our radio signals. And we used to go by the name WMFE. Our call letters were our name. But over time, we have evolved into a multimedia news organization, because that's where the audience is, and that's where the need is. And so it didn't make sense for our name to be our call letters. We still have those call letters, and we still operate that radio signal, but that's only one of the things that we do. We have put more resources into our digital output, such as we have one of the most robust regional news or local and regional news websites in the region now, at cfpublic.org. We have a robust local news app, free mobile app on the phone. We have 4 local podcasts. We have a weekly news update newsletter called The Wrap that you can subscribe to. We are all over social media, and that's where our audience is growing, on digital platforms, on the web, on podcasts, on the newsletter. That's where the audience is. This just like we can't automatically expect trust to attach to us, we can't think that if we build it, they will come. We have to be in those spaces, just like you are with this podcast. People are in the podcast world. We all have to be too. People are scrolling on their phones on social media. We need to
all the time.
Be in their feed. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of disinformation out there, but we need to provide real information there where people already are, and explain why we should be trusted and we should be their source of legitimate, reliable, local, regional, national news.
Well, you know what? And I thank you for sharing the locations again. And I'm going to ask you before we wrap up, I want them to know where they can find a media point that has credibility. I think you've weathered a great storm. I know public funding is dwindling, which has an impact. But you know what? We depend upon you to be that resource. And the fact that you're doing it through a spirit of collaboration across your industry and in partnership with the community that you serve, I think organizations can learn from that. Whether you be in the finance industry, dealing with members at a credit union, or a customer at a bank, or you're in the retail space, a lot of times what we had to do is put some care back in there. And the framework I wrote was we had to have compassion, appreciation, respect, and empathy. And I hear that in all of your messaging and everything that you're saying in this area. So I couldn't have picked a better guest to talk with me about collaboration. We could probably spend another 30 minutes, but I'm winding down here because I'm trying to be mindful of your time and the listeners. And listeners, I want you to know that, go back and listen to all 7 of these episodes. And I guarantee you the voice of leadership is going to change the way you lead. It's going to change the impact you make in your organization. So as we come to a close, Judith, what would you like to share? What are we got the 2 takeaways, get them in the room, and then model vulnerability. But what else would you like to share with the listeners of Off the Record, the Real Talk podcast?
I would really love to share that if you're looking for a place to find reliable, fact-based news and information about our community, our local community, we have made big investments in our local news capacity. We've grown our local news capacity by 50% over the past 3 years. And I would love for Central Florida Public Media to be your trusted source. And I would encourage you, if you aren't familiar with us yet, to go to cfpublic.org, and you can learn all that you need to know there. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter, The Wrap, from right there. You can find out about our local podcasts right there, right here where you're listening to this podcast. You can find our local podcasts. We have a local news roundup that's also called The Wrap. It gives you all the local news that you need to know from the week in about 12 minutes. So that's really easy to do, and it doesn't require too much of your time. There are lots of different ways that you can get involved. And Allie, I would just love to remind folks, you mentioned the government funding situation, and that's kind of the elephant in the room with public media right now. It's not just dwindling, it's gone. State and federal funding is gone, eliminated, disappeared. So what that means to us at Central Florida Public Media is a loss of $400,000 every year. And that gulf is going to have to be made up by generous members of this community. And so, I think what I would leave your listeners and viewers with is we are in a situation and in a time when, if we as a society and as a community want to preserve access to reliable, factual, trustworthy local news and information, we as a community have to decide to support it in the same way that we have long supported the arts and education and healthcare and social services, all of those things that are public goods, but that the market doesn't support. Add journalism to that list now, because that's the situation that we're in right now. If we don't protect it, whether it's from Central Florida Public Media or Vox Populi or some other outlet, if we don't protect it, it's going to go away. And that is something that I think I would love to leave your listeners with, is that we need to take responsibility as a community for our information ecosystem. And I invite you all to do that.
Well, Judith Smelser, it has been a pleasure to have you on Off the Record, the Real Talk podcast. You never know, folks. You might go to CF Public. What's the? I don't mess it up.
CFpublic.org.
Okay, I want to make sure I had it right. CFpublic.org. You might see me out there one day. You never know where we're going to go with the podcast. But, you can follow us on StreamYard, iHeart. You can also find us on Spotify and in Apple Podcasts. But it's been so good to have you on the show. I thank you for taking my invitation and accepting it and coming on and sharing these nuggets of leadership, especially from a spirit of collaboration, where the messaging that you deliver to the community is so important about empowering.
What a pleasure it's been, Allie. I really, really appreciate talking to you. And what you're doing here with this podcast is really, really important, I think, for leaders in this community.
Thank you so much. And folks, I just want to say, if it's 6:00 on a Wednesday, to drop by. This episode will be followed by an incredible piece. I'm going to have a local, well, I won't say he's so local because he's on the south. He's in the Southeast, but I'm going to have a guest that's incredible coming on, leader of one of the historically Black colleges and university. And we're going to talk about the voice of courage, voice of courage. And we're going to finally round this out with the voice of legacy. And I got a special guest coming for that one as well. We look forward to seeing you each and every week here. Look for us where you find your podcast. I look forward to seeing you. And if it's 6:00 on a Wednesday, it's time for Off the Record with Allie. Take care. See you soon.